Hey, Dan Candell here again. So happy that you guys are keeping up with my blogs. I really hope you find them useful. After the last blog I posted about 5 mental ways to overcome anxiety, I got a couple of messages back from people asking, well, Dan, the first tip was you were asking us or telling us to educate ourselves about anxiety. What do you think we should know about anxiety that will help us actually overcome? Well, you see, a lot of people, I hear this all the time. Anxiety runs in my family, or anxiety is genetic. Now, there's no actual proof that says that anxiety runs in people's family. But when I ask them, I'm like, okay, so if anxiety runs in your family, is your grandmother anxious? Yes. Is your mother anxious? Yes. Or is your grandfather, or is your father anxious? Yes. So therefore, anxiety has been somewhat of a learned behavior. You see, we're taught different ways to respond, different ways to think and to feel. And quite often, anxiety is produced first by anxious thoughts. So when we're thinking negatively about something, we start to feel anxious about that thing or that situation. And then when we start to feel that way, we start to respond or react in a way. So here's what anxiety is. Anxiety is just like any other habit. So anxiety becomes a habituated behavior. It's just a false alarm. That's it. So let's say you start feeling anxious one day when you start driving down the highway or when you go over a bridge. And you're like, there's no logical reason as to why I should feel anxious about driving over a bridge or about driving next to a truck. I know I'm completely safe. But let's say there's just this running tape in your mind that now prevents you from driving down the highway because that anxiety has become so big. It kind of overgrows in your brain. It makes this deep groove, carves this deep groove in your brain. That's what anxiety is. Anxiety is a pattern. Now, there is one sensitizing event. It's called the initial sensitizing event. And it's usually one time, one instance, or one event that will cause a person to start a pattern of anxiety. I had a client come in one time and she was afraid of bees. And she had this horrible fear of bees. It was holding her back from going outside. It was holding her back from going on camping trips and all this other stuff. So we found out that the reason why she was afraid of bees is because when she was younger, about 3 or 4 years old, her mother screamed at her from outside, "Get away from the bee's nest, they're gonna kill you, that's awful, don't go near them." And then later on, the girl ended up getting stung by a bee, and when she got stung by a bee, a little girl getting stung by a bee, that's a big event, that hurts, right? Ouchies. So she recorded that in her mind. She then played it over and over and over again in her mind, and that pattern just continued on like that. So every time she saw a bee, the pattern got worse. So every time she thought about bees, she started to feel anxious. Every time she started to feel anxious, she started to respond in an anxious way. The same thing is true with driving or driving down the highway, the example we used before. So there's one instance, one scenario, which causes a person to feel anxious. And then there's what we call subsequent sensitizing events. There are other events or times that reinforce, or other thoughts that reinforce that anxiety or that anxious pattern. So here's what I really want you to know about anxiety. Anxiety is a habituated pattern. There's a situation where it starts, and you don't have to know what that situation is. It doesn't matter what that situation is. Then it goes on a pattern. And every time it starts, it just keeps going and going and going. The problem is, most people don't know how to interrupt that pattern. They don't know how to stop that pattern. And there are different techniques that you can use to stop the pattern. However, there are better ways to break free from those things so that the things that used to bother you no longer bother you anymore. Now, the method I use is hypnosis, and hypnosis is one of the most powerful and effective ways to help people reprogram those times. But what I'm also doing is I'm also arming you with tools, strategies, and techniques that stop the pattern in its tracks. If you don't stop the pattern, anxiety can potentially keep running, and it carves a deep, deep groove in your brain, so that groove becomes easier, and it becomes now your normal. So you normally traverse or go through or go down that groove, down that path. What we do by arming you with tools and strategies to rewire that pattern, it literally fills that old groove in and it carves a new groove. So one of the ways to interrupt that is, instead of thinking about all the negative things, how you don't want to feel, you think about how you do want to feel. You see, we're always so caught up in how we don't want to feel, what we don't want to do, instead of identifying what we do want to feel, how we want to respond, how we want to act, how we want to behave. So my friends, that's what anxiety is. Anxiety, I hate to tell you, it's not genetic. It's not something that runs in your blood. Anxiety is a learned, habituated behavior. And it just so happens that things that might bother one person might not bother another, and vice versa. So when you understand that anxiety is a pattern, it's a habituated pattern that just finds a loop. And when you find out how to break that pattern, find out how to interrupt that loop, you'll be finding ways to feel more calm, more relaxed, and more confident. So my name's Dan Candell. Hey, if you want to get help on reducing your anxiety, you can contact me. You can set up a free strategy session so I can gain some more insight into specifically what your anxiety is like, so I can understand it a little bit better, so I can help you understand it a little bit better, and then move forward to break that pattern. And I also have a program, it's called From Stress to Success, the Anxiety Toolkit. And this is a program, it's a self-paced program that you go through online, and it's just like working with me one-on-one. It's a little bit less expensive than working with me privately. If money is an issue for you, I highly recommend that program. My traditional program, working with people with anxiety, most of the people notice a great drastic difference after just 1 or 2 sessions. So guys, thank you so much for following my blog. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos and future blogs. And remember, do good, be well, and be true to who you are.